All right. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Alain Bengoche. I'm an assistant professor in UNLV's Department of Early Childhood Multilingualism and Special Education. I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Kate Menken, who will be discussing the topic of equity and bilingual education. Dr. Menken is a professor of linguistics at Queens College of the City University of New York, CUNY, and a research fellow at the Research Institute for the Study of Language in an Urban Society of the CUNY Graduate Center. She is a co-principal investigator at the CUNY New York State Initiative for Emergent Bilinguals Project. Her research interests include language education policy, bilingual education, and emergent bilinguals in secondary schools. Just a note, please remember to provide comments and questions using the Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. With that said, let's welcome Dr. Menken.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. From my home to your home, it's wonderful to be with all of you. And thank you to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas College of Education for this opportunity. I'm going to speak with all of you about bilingual education. There we go. So I think it's, I understand that there are people with us today who do not have a background in bilingual education. So I thought I would begin by sharing just some of the basic information. What is bilingual education and a definition? Bilingual education provides instruction in English and a language other than English in all school subjects, and thereby a means for children to become bilingual and biliterate. I think it's really important to remember the roots, the origins of bilingual education in the US today, and to recognize that bilingual education in the US today has its origins in the civil rights movement. And that bilingual education for immigrant communities is part of broader efforts for racial justice. Bilingual education exists today due to pressure from parents and community activists. Bilingual education programs have been fought hard for, by, and for immigrant communities. So they are on the bottom left. You can see a picture of Puerto Rican activists in the 1960s. It's thanks to largely Puerto Rican activists going in to disrupt New York City Board of Education meetings that bilingual education is offered in New York City public schools today, just like many places around the country. It's thanks to the efforts of immigrant communities and their activism that we have the benefit of these programs today. So some of the models for emergent bilinguals in US schools. Emergent bilinguals is a term that I'm going to be using in lieu of what I understand is used in Nevada, the term English language learners. And in using the term emergent bilinguals, it's a reminder that in adding English to their linguistic repertoire, students are becoming bi or multilingual. So on this chart, here just an overview of some of the program models. More than just these exist, but these are the ones most commonly found. We have the bottom row are English as a new language, ENL, or also known as English as a second language programs. Those are pull out or push in, and those are what are commonly offered in Nevada schools, where instruction is typically monolingual in English only. And then the top three rows are our bilingual education programs. So I'll move from the third row and go up. The third row shows our transitional bilingual education programs. And the students in these all of the students are emergent bilinguals, and they all speak the same home language. The language of instruction is both languages at the beginning, English and the language other than English. But the idea is that it's done with a quick progression to most or all instruction in English, with the goal being, the linguistic goal being English proficiency. And the idea being that these will be rapid exit programs. So typically after 3 to 5 years, students will exit these programs into English only instruction. Now the top two rows of the bilingual education, the different types of bilingual programs that are available, are what are called developmental or maintenance bilingual education programs. And the idea is that these ones are sustained over long periods of time, that they are not only offered for children in elementary school, but the idea is that they will be in these programs K to 12. And the second row are one-way bilingual education programs in which all students are emergent bilinguals who speak the same home language. And instruction is in English and a language other than English, with the linguistic goals being bilingualism and biliteracy. And then the top row are our dual language bilingual education programs. These programs have become enormously popular in US schools in just in the past decade, although the vast majority of emergent bilingual students still do receive all of their instruction typically only in English. However, this type of bilingual education is growing. These programs are also called two-way bilingual education or dual immersion programs. The students in these programs are a combination of emergent bilinguals, bilingual students who arrive to school at different points along a continuum of bilingualism because a language other than English, as well as English, is spoken in their home, and English monolinguals. Instruction in the dual language programs is in English and a language other than English. And for both the one-way and the dual language programs, there are two of the common configurations for this are about at least 50% of instruction in the language other than English and 50% in English, or a 90-10 model is another commonly found one where instruction is 90% in the language other than English, with that moving towards a 50-50 balance. And the linguistic goals, or the goals of these programs is bilingualism, biliteracy, and cross-cultural understanding. These programs are diverse by design because they have the presence of English monolinguals in those classrooms. So I would also add critical consciousness as well should be an essential or central part of those programs. And so what is the research base? You know, at this point, it really isn't the success or the evidence in favor of bilingual education is so robust and so well established at this point that it really is not debated in educational research at this time. So it's an established research base showing that emergent bilinguals in bilingual education programs typically outperform their peers in English-only programming and are likely to succeed academically. So just as one example, this is a listing of several meta-analyses. These are quantitative, where quantitative methods are used to analyze several different studies, in these cases, dozens of studies, all of which support this same conclusion. And so one of the examples of this is that teaching students to read in their home language promotes higher levels of reading achievement in English. And this is really a central part of understanding of bilingual education theory, this idea that skills students learn in their home language will transfer to English. And it's important also to discuss some of the socio-emotional benefits. You know, we talk a lot about the academic benefits of bilingual education, but it's also very important to talk about the socio-emotional benefits, especially, this is especially of great concern for families. So bilingual education not only offers an opportunity for emergent bilinguals to sustain and extend their home language practices, but also to embrace their cultural, linguistic, and immigrant identities. You know, we talk a lot right now about culturally responsive pedagogy, Gloria Ladson-Billings' works, or Django Paris's extension of that to talk about culturally sustaining pedagogy. We also talk about anti-racist education, and we talk about holistic pedagogy or instruction. And, you know, I really think how it's not possible to do that if we're also not looking at language and considering the language and the language practices of our students, acknowledging and building on those. And then there are the economics benefits of bilingual education. This is just a photograph in the top right corner of Chase Bank advertising for positions and noting that there were bilingual positions available. You know, within the context of globalization, increasingly multilingual world, the skill of bilingualism is one that's very desirable in the workplace and offers economic opportunities. And then lastly, this is a very exciting area of the field of bilingualism, the cognitive benefits of bilingualism. Ellen Bialystok, who's someone who's done a lot of research in this area. And now with the advent of new technologies in the fields of neurolinguistics and psycholinguistics, we're able to do things like brain mapping. And what it shows is that the minds of bi or multilinguals function fundamentally differently from those of monolinguals. And with that comes a set of cognitive benefits, because you kind of think about, if you are a bilingual and you think about using those two languages each time you're doing that, it's a form of mental exercise. So some of the examples of these benefits include stronger mental flexibility, metalinguistic awareness, superior executive function, and positive transfer, which I discussed earlier. And these are all skills that are very, these kinds of benefits also are very helpful to students academically. And it's very interesting as well, like one of the areas that they found is that if you are bilingual and you use your two languages regularly, that will actually delay the onset of Alzheimer's disease. Okay. And then this is a chart that was compiled by Thomas and Collier in 2012. They actually have a 2019 study a publication that they just published in the Annual Review of Applied Linguistics that shows their longitudinal work over 32 years, in which they've been comparing the performance of emergent bilinguals in these different program models, the ones that I described to you earlier. And what they have found in their research, if you look at those two green lines at the top, they're comparing the performance of emergent bilinguals enrolled in different educational program models to normal curve equivalents, or NCEs, on standardized tests of English reading. And so those two green lines at the top is the performance of our students in those maintenance or developmental forms of bilingual education that I mentioned, like the dual language programs or two-way bilingual programs, as well as one-way. And they're showing that the students are really outperforming their peers in English only, such as English as a second language, and also outperforming those in shorter term bilingual education programs like transitional. And so what this research really shows us is that, well, in short, the research base is robust and convincing, showing that emergent bilinguals benefit from sustained long-term developmental bilingual education. And I understand that this is an idea that might seem counterintuitive to some people, but the ample research indicates students in bilingual programs will actually learn English more effectively than in English-only programs. I understand that for some, it seems that if you educate students monolingually in English, that they would then learn more English. But in fact, if you understand bilingual education research, the opposite very well may be true, that if you offer students the opportunity to receive home language instruction, that they will actually learn English better than they would in monolingual programs. However, they don't always, we don't always listen to educational research, and language education policy decisions in the US and elsewhere are typically much more political than they are pedagogical. And this is unfortunate in this context, because what it means is that the vast majority of emergent bilinguals nationally are not provided with bilingual education programs. Most of our emergent bilingual students are in English-only programs, such as English as a second language or English as a new language. So I think we should throw that away, and we can thank my son for the transitions on this talk. So I want to turn attention now to Nevada and your context, with my greetings as a New Yorker coming in. But emergent bilinguals in Nevada comprise 17.1% of the entire student population. And that's compared to about 10% nationally. So if you look at this, if you look at this map, the dark blue states are those with the largest density of emergent bilinguals. And so what you see is that Nevada has a very high density of emergent bilinguals, only after California and Texas. And additionally, 67.5% of all emergent bilinguals in Nevada speak Spanish. I spoke with Ignacio Ruiz from the Clark County Public School System. He was saying that it's over 95% of the emergent bilinguals there, if I'm remembering correctly, speak Spanish. So right here, what you're seeing are demographics that really would lend themselves to offering bilingual education. Also, the fact of that 42.7% of your entire public school population is Latinx. And so these demographics really show that offering bilingual education, particularly starting in Spanish and English, really would not be a heavy lift because you have the student population to do that. And to do that, of course, I would love to see bilingual education, in all of the languages of our students present. But Spanish and English seems in the state of Nevada like a very logical starting point. I wanted to talk about the performance of emergent bilinguals in Nevada. And if you look at this chart, emergent bilinguals are the light blue lines, and the dark blue shows the pass rates on different state tests for all students. On the English Language Arts, or ELA exam, 14.6% of emergent bilinguals pass that test, as compared to 41.8% of all students. And then on the math, only 15.8% of all emergent bilinguals passed, as compared to 54.5%. And those are low passing rates. And then what's of great concern is that the graduation rates of emergent bilinguals is very low. It's 43% in the state of Nevada, whereas nationally that graduation rate for emergent bilinguals is 67%. And what I'm suggesting is, I know that these are these test results are very important for those of you who are in schools. And what I'm suggesting is that actually, if you offer educational programs that really support students' home language practices, that you can expect to see increased performances. So in Nevada right now, there are currently only 3 schools offering bilingual education in the entire state, and those are in Washoe County. There are none in Clark County at this time, in Las Vegas. So my response as a New York, I live and work in New York City. And so my response when I learned that was, what? Again, thanks to my son for the graphics. So what that means is that there are actually more bilingual education programs in my neighborhood of Jackson Heights, Queens in New York City alone than in the entire state of Nevada.
I'm gonna look at the, I actually think dual language would be.
And I wanted to talk and turn our attention now to the recent expansion of dual language bilingual education in the United States. That this particular form, I think in part because of that Thomas and Collier chart, but because of the data in general that's been gathered about dual language bilingual education programs, they have really increased in popularity, particularly within the last decade in states across the United States. So by 2015, there were over 3,000 dual language programs in the US, and that was up from only about 300 in 2001. So over 35 states now offer dual language programs. Those are the blue states in the map here. Although you'll notice that Nevada was yellow at the time. This is from school year 2016 to 2017. And so maybe someone in the chat can say if the programs in Washoe County were offered before then, but what I suspect that it might be that those programs are pretty new. Otherwise, they were not self-reported. But here's the New York Times headline: dual language programs are on the rise, even for native English speakers. What we see in New York is that the programs are so enormously popular that families that there are lotteries to get our children into bilingual education programs. And I think a piece of that, one of the concerns that's come up is that they're in fact so popular that emergent bilinguals are not always getting seats. And we have to remember that that is the population for whom these programs were first and foremost intended. And we have to ensure in starting new programs that they do get seats in them. So that's been something just to watch out for if you do want to take this on. But here's some states that have really actively expanded their dual language bilingual program offerings. So Utah has expanded bilingual education, dual language specifically, to now over 200 schools. Delaware now has a similar statewide initiative. Portland Public Schools has doubled its number of dual language bilingual education programs to more than 5,000 students in the past 8 years, excuse me. And New York City recently launched dozens of new dual language programs across a host of languages and now has over 550 programs. So we're serving thousands and thousands of students in New York City public schools. In languages, Spanish and Mandarin were always traditional, were the programs that historically have been available through bilingual education, but now we also see new language programming options such as Arabic, Korean, Hebrew, Urdu, Bengali, Haitian, and some other languages. So I'll move on for the sake of time. I'm trying to stick to my minutes timeline to the recommendations. Bilingual education is a right. For students enrolling, English-speaking students enrolling in dual language bilingual education programs, that is a choice option for them. However, it's a necessity for our students who are emergent bilinguals. And I think it's time to bring it to Nevada, given all of the research evidence that shows the effectiveness of bilingual education. And what I would recommend is the development and implementation of bilingual education programs in Nevada that center emergent bilinguals. And you have the demographics, like I said, to easily start. So here's some of the things, here are some of the considerations here's what school leaders and policymakers would need. Obviously, some startup funds would be helpful to develop and purchase bilingual curricula and assessments. But that's really it. This is to make sure that the curricula, the materials are available both in English as well as the language other than English. But with Title III funding for emergent bilinguals, and remember that all Title III, this is federal funding is only to be used for the education of emergent bilinguals. So with Title III funding for emergent bilinguals, and then also given the reality that, this is an unfortunate reality in my view, but given the reality that bilingual teachers are typically paid the same as other classroom teachers, there's no reason for additional costs. The top right is a picture of a big community organizer, and it's very important also to work with our families. And when we find that families at this stage in the 21st century, who would not want their child to be bilingual, right, and biliterate? And when we talk to families about the benefits of bilingual education, families are very interested. And so in addition, what we need are prepared bilingual teachers. But your pipeline is there. The University of Nevada at Las Vegas can prepare bilingual education teachers. Alain, who's there, is answering the chat, is the moderator of today's talk, and he knows the details about this program. Vanessa Mari at Nevada State College, they started a new bilingual education teacher preparation program this fall. And so that's another place where bilingual education teachers can be prepared. And I really recommend partnerships between schools and these universities. So that they can, first of all, this is so that the universities can have placements for their student teachers. And then on the school side to ensure that teacher candidates are being prepared in the ways that match the aims of the particular schools. And additionally, that way school staff can receive professional development and technical assistance, and then to together explore pathways for in-service teachers to get their bilingual licensure, because when new bilingual education programs are started, what often happens is that an existing classroom is then converted to a bilingual classroom, especially if the teacher has the bilingual licensure as well. And that could come from a new teacher or from an in-service teacher who's then pursued the licensure. So thank you so much for your time. All of the citations that I referred to today, as well as further evidence for bilingual education, can be found on my personal website. I was getting asked so often for just more information. People want to learn more, that I put it on my website on that page, Bilingual Education Evidence. I tried to pick things there that are, pretty accessible, some for families as well as for researchers, but also for educators in the field. I know you're very busy. And that's my email and my website. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Dr. Mencken. We have about 2 minutes, and I'll just make a quick statement and I'll ask a quick follow-up right after that. So to echo Dr. Menken's statements, Nevada is fertile ground for developing bilingual programs, as we could see. So although staffing schools with bilingual teachers may initially pose a challenge, I think Nevada could overcome this. Fortunately, the state of Nevada established a bilingual endorsement years ago for teachers to become specialized in bilingual pedagogy and language development. And as Dr. Mencken mentioned, UNLV and Nevada State College offer coursework leading to this endorsement. However, these programs are currently under-enrolled due to the lack of bilingual programs in Nevada. So for this reason, university, school, and district partnerships could create a pipeline for enrollment in bilingual teacher education programs and staffing of pre-K to 12 bilingual programs. And further in the future, opportunities exist for a Grow Your Own initiative, whereby graduates of bilingual pre-K to 12 programs could then become bilingual teachers in our own community. So I guess, Dr. Mencken, in a minute or so, could you please add to this idea of university, school, and district partnerships? What is a major way that the university and the district could partner to prop up and promote bilingual ed based on your experience in New York or around the country?
So, one of the things that we do is that a particular college of education will partner with a particular school and, for example, have a lab school set up where all of the student teachers from a particular program will receive their student teaching experience within the partner school. If you have a lot of students, that might need to be several schools, which is what we do in our program. And then what happens is that the students in the programs who are, this teacher candidates, then are getting prepared and are typically hired at the lab school sites, or they're prepared very well and are hired elsewhere in the district as a result. That's just one form of the kinds of partnerships. But basically, the teacher pipeline exists as soon as our students in universities know that the job opportunities are available, they will select this area as a major or as an area to get their certification in. And that can look a lot of different ways. We also now, I think we can expect to see more Title III professional development grants. So you might consider applying for one of those at your university to fund students to receive their bilingual education training, and then also to support professional development for the schools in this area.
Great, thank you so much. And with that said, we'll close today's session. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending.